Welcome, everyone. Thank you for making the time to join us. We're very excited to kick off year 4 of this Science and Practice webinar series focused on climate change. We got today's event as well as several other events over the coming months that we're really excited about. And again, this is a partnership with the Forest Stewardship Guild and Maine Tree Foundation, as well as the University of Maine Center for Research on Sustainable Forest, support from the Munsungan Fund. Today, we're going to focus on Southern Maine and some of the challenges that we're seeing there, as well as management practices. And I'll soon turn it over to my co-partner. But first, we want to respectfully acknowledge that the Wabanaki, the people of the Dawnland, are the original stewards of the forest we discussed today. The University of Maine is located on Marsh Island in the homeland of the Penobscot Nation, where issues of water and territorial rights and encroachment upon sacred sites are ongoing. The University's Center for Research on Sustainable Forest supports forest research and education in the homeland of the Penobscot Nation and other Wabanaki tribal nations. We strongly support the inclusion of Indigenous science and values in forest stewardship management and research. I'll also say that the Washington Post just did a great opinion piece about 2 hours ago. If you take a look at Maine, it's talking about the conservation and intersection with the Maine's tribal communities, which is a nice overview and definitely aligns with issues that we're talking about today. But today, as I said, we're going to go to Southern Maine, talk about fire, southern pine beetle, and all the other challenges with the management. Again, this is part of a larger series, this partnership with Forest Stewardship Guild and Maine Tree. We'll put the series website in the link for people to join us. But for now, I'll turn it over to Amanda to introduce our speakers and get going with the actual session. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. I'm excited to help facilitate today. I work for the Forest Stewards Guild, and I get to collaborate with Jon Bailey, who you'll meet in just a minute, on prescribed fire through the Maine Prescribed Fire Council. So today we're going to hear from Jon Bailey from the Nature Conservancy about management at the Waterboro Barrens, and we're also going to hear from Kevin Dodds from the US Forest Service. The two of those guys are a team among many who are trying to manage the Waterboro Barrens sustainably. Without further ado, I think I'll pass it over to Jon and let you share your screen and get started. We'll get going. Sorry, I forgot the poll questions. I don't know if we want to we'll do a quick survey of our audience. Thank you, Meg. Okay, so as Jon is getting ready to share his screen, let us know in the poll, where are you from? What background brings you to this meeting? Are you a forester, a scientist, another natural resource professional, interested public, or other? And if you have any ideas for other topics for future meetings, then please feel free to drop them in the chat as well. So we'll give folks maybe another 15 seconds to complete the poll. Thanks for being super responsive, everybody. This will help our presenters know a little bit of where people are coming from. We're going to end in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bink, ending the poll, and Meg will share the results. And we see that over half of our group here today is from Maine. Another quarter or so is from the New England region. We have another 20% from outside of New England. Nobody from Canada today, but hopefully they won't have to worry about southern pine beetle for a little while. So backgrounds that bring people to this meeting, almost half consider themselves a forester. Over a third are some other kind of natural resource professional. And we also have a few scientists in the mix and another other. So thanks, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing. And thanks, everyone, so much for completing the poll and letting our speakers know where we're coming from. And now I'll turn it over to Jon, who will get us started with his presentation on Waterboro Barrens. Thank you.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Amanda. Am I off mute?
Yep, we gotcha.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to double check. And you're seeing my second screen?
We are seeing, you're not in presentation mode yet. There it goes. Now it's good. Got it.
All right, great. Thank you, Amanda. And thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Jon Bailey. I work with the Nature Conservancy here in Maine. And I have the pleasure of being a land manager and a fire manager. So I also lead prescribed fire here in Maine. And Waterboro Pine Barrens is one of the sites the Nature Conservancy owns in fee. We have conservation easements around it, as well as to our west of the map is the Vernon Walker Wildlife Management Area, which also has some residual pitch pine habitat. On the map, the red area, it's a field modeling map for our burn plans and fire management plan. But the red indicates pitch pine scrub oak pine barrens, which is what we're going to focus mainly on today. The area was protected by the Nature Conservancy and partners back in the late 70s. It was slated to be the sandy soils, outwash sandy soils. It was very easy for development. And so those development pressures, if you're looking kind of in the middle of the map, you can see there's a couple inholdings. The whole site was going to be houses, golf course, an airstrip, and it kind of went belly up. And when it went belly up, the Nature Conservancy was able to kind of go in and acquire two of the largest parcels. So that was all around 70s or early 80s. And then since then, we've been able to acquire tracts around the edges to kind of fill in the blanks and the holes. A lot of it is did developed around the preserve, which becomes sort of management issues, but they're more of a hashed line there on the map. Our areas of pitch pine scrub oak barrens. So we have wildland urban interface buffers as well within the site. Looking at this map historically, fire, the Nature Conservancy started doing fire management around Unit 9 and 7, which is almost dead center in the map. Those areas were a little lower complexity blueberry barrens or open savannas. And at that time, in the early 2000s, they were doing, my predecessors were thinning along fire roads and boundaries about 300 in, and then leaving their residual forest as is. The area that is in red, most of that was burnt in 1947 wildfires that went through. There were some small pockets, but that was a stand replacement disturbance. Oh, we already moved. So on the right is basically just a description of our prescription for the forest management plan and our timber harvesting. For the site, we basically would go in, if we were to go through our burn plan an area without mechanical treatment prior, there would be no way that we'd be able to contain that fire safely. Under the variables of being a low or moderate or high severity fire, because it's a dog hair thicket, overstocked, a lot of dead and down fuels and neighbors and homes and infrastructure. And so thinning and mechanical has always been part of our equation of management. And typically we'd go in and do breaks around the perimeter of the edges, reduce those fuels, and then create fire breaks. And so before I switch slides, that's what you're looking at. All those different numbers indicate different management areas or burn units that will be burning. This is a zoomed in area of Unit 19. So it shows a lot of the urban interface and all of those, the canopies that you're seeing in the aerial imagery, especially on the right side, the east side of the map, those are all pitch pine trees. The top of Ross Mountain used to be, it was part of that development, but they were going to make a ski run and they actually put a rope tow in. And then all those houses on the north are also pitch pine scrub oak. But this shows you kind of how we decide, lay out a map, show drop points for the burn crew to know where those areas are. If you look at the imagery on the south subunit, you can see the thinning along both from drop point SW all the way to southeast. You can see that 300 to 500 foot buffer where the crown density is very spaced out. And for folks that aren't too involved in fire, what that does is if the fire is up in the canopy in the interior, it will go right down to the ground and be a surface fire. And then at that point, there'll be an area void of fuels. That will be our fire break. So that's a typical map. And as we move around, that's what our units start looking like. And it looks kind of like a quilt where we treat an area mechanically, we come in and then burn. We let it sit for about at least 5 years, if not longer. And then we'll come back in and we'll reevaluate our next entry, whether it's mechanical, then fire. These photos show our work with our partners. On the left is a funnel trap for southern pine beetle. We started several years ago with putting traps up and trying to be proactive on what is occurring to the south of us in New York State with infestations and change. Being a science-based organization, we want science driving our management decisions and why we're doing this, and working with our partners and collaborators on getting the best information to make the best actions on the ground. The photo in the middle is Abbott Mountain. That's state land that abuts us, but that shows a post-treatment with our cutting, and that is actually post-fire as well. And then that's Steve Bodkin on the right, and that's a dog hair thicket, untreated area. He's looking through a prism to get a basal area as well. As we started doing this work, we went from just thinning trees around the edges and safe to burn, creating fire breaks off the fire roads. And then we went into southern pine beetle is to ourselves. Our colleagues are telling us what they're dealing with. And we're trying to be proactive. So we switched gears to being like, we're going to harvest everything now and get it closer to the management results that we want, but also make it more healthy and resilient when we do get an infestation or an occurrence. And as we started doing this, we started taking the forest that was overstocked, unhealthy, and full of fuels that everyone was used to looking at since that canopy was changed in the 47 fire and then regenerated. We did a lot of public outreach with our neighbors. We did receive some pushback and navigated those challenges. And one of the things that we realized was our ecological forest management and the plan that we were learning from our colleagues across the country and in within the Northeast was pushing the boundaries of state statutes for logging. And so we were starting to want to do ecological restoration, and we knew what the system historically would look like, but we were pushing ourselves against regulatory issues of actually violating clear-cut laws. And so as we were looking at this and being proactive, we decided to host the Maine Forest Service, forest regulators, on doing a site visit. And these are all the collaborators that participated in that. We were trying to figure out how to navigate both the regulations in the state and what we felt were our obligations of managing the land to both protect the community and the landscape and all the globally rare species that are found there. We were hesitant and wanted to be cautious on our steps. One, because we want to lead by example and not break laws. And two, it's privately owned land by the Nature Conservancy, and we're a nonprofit, but we felt we wanted to be worried. We were worried about opening it up to a public comment and perception as well. But we wanted science to drive our management. And this tour was very proactive, very great, and got a lot of people on the same page and was well worth the time. This is a before picture on the left of the basal area and the density of the canopy, and then the understory of the scrub oak. It's classic, what we call a dog hair thicket. Everything is pretty stressed. The trees are small diameter. And then the right is post-treatment after we've gone in and logged, and that has had one entry of prescribed fire 2 years post-logging. So the wind can get in there. Kevin's going to talk more about this, but the wind can get in. It's harder for southern pine beetle to go from tree to tree and spread, and it's pushing it more towards a management maintenance phase, what it would classically look like. some logging photos and mechanical equipment, fellow bunchers and skidders, the log landing, some of the slopes, and some of the fire roads that the community drives through. And then just some great species and people and good fire. These are the end results that we want to see. Painted and box turtles and all the invertebrates and whippoorwills and good low intensity fire, low to moderate intensity fire is what we want to see in there, and a healthy balance. And that's what I have. I think that although we're owning and managing this property and we work with partners and collaborators and scientists and researchers to help drive it as a group discussion on what is best for these landscapes, and realizing that these landscapes are critical rare and they're beyond our ownerships and stewardship of areas. And so working together helps us fine tune our end results and management. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. I don't see any questions yet. We'll pass it over to Kevin Dodds, who will share his screen and talk about the southern pine beetle side of the coin here. Just a note for folks, we also will get to hear from Dan Perkins from the Maine Forest Service if you have questions about regulations. So Kevin, you're welcome to share your screen, and we'll let you take it away from here.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. All right. So I should be up and running, I hope.
Looks good.
There we go. Okay. Thanks for the invite to talk. It's great to be here. I'm a forest entomologist with the US Forest Service out of Durham, New Hampshire, and I've been working on southern pine beetle in the Northeast since really detection in New York, and gone through a lot of different phases with it, working on suppression early, but now moving into more of prevention and tying in with all of these awesome restoration efforts that are going on in the Northeast, and some of what you just heard from John and all of the awesome work that they're doing over in in Waterboro, which looks incredible when you get a chance to go through there. Let's see. All right, well, I just wanted to start off just throwing out some signs in case, if you haven't heard about southern pine beetle at all and you're in the woods a lot. I don't expect you're going to run into infested trees, in Maine right now, but some of our, if you're from, a little bit more south in New England, there is a chance now. Massachusetts has some recent finds, and so you never know. Southern pine beetle adults, very small. You're talking about like the size of a grain of rice, maybe a bulked up size of a grain of rice. Beetle, an insect you're not really going to see, but the signs on trees are what really stand out. This figure, second to the left, those little white dots are the hardened resin, and they're the attack sites for southern pine beetle. And those do really pop out when you're walking through a forest, and you can see those. There's some other insects that cause them, so that doesn't mean, boom, I found southern pine beetle, but it's something that you would want to look at a little bit more critically. And that next picture is a close-up of those resin globs, and you can see in one or two of those, there's actually a southern pine beetle that had been killed by the resin. That resin defense is there to push beetles out or other injuries to the bark. Anything trying to invade the phloem tissue, that's a defense to push those out. The other thing that probably would stand out pretty quickly to most people are these fading crowns. And so, southern pine beetle attacks the tree. Tree's got a green crown. It starts to dry out, so it fades from green to yellow to red to brown. And one or two trees like this, in a forest isn't anything really to worry about. But if you were to come across, a pocket of those that from 6 months ago were pretty healthy, that would be another thing that you'd want to get checked out with some of your state forest health people, or reaching out to us in the Forest Service. Okay, so I thought what I would do today to sort of tie in with John and all the work that they're doing over there is I'm not going to go into big detail on southern pine beetle biology just for the sake of time, but I did want to touch on some biological factors that are really important in terms of how we manage southern pine beetle, and then also why southern pine beetle is so successful. And the first thing that sort of has been protecting us up here until recently is that the insect is limited by winter temperatures. And I'll show a figure on this in a second. But if you think about, mid-Atlantic states has been that sort of northern barrier for southern pine beetle. Now, because of our climate change and the warming temperatures we're seeing, a whole new area is opening up for southern pine beetle that's now acceptable habitat where they can get in and kill trees. So if we start to see cooler temperatures again, or even if it's just a year here or there, that'll really help knock back the populations. So it is a very aggressive beetle. And when you think about North America, we have a whole set of dendroctonous species that are aggressive, but southern pine beetle's right up there with mountain pine beetle. It is a pest in hard pine. You'll hear people talk about it in other conifers, but those are primarily secondary species that are incidental. They'll go in, maybe reproduce, usually not. White pine is a host, but we don't see these large sustained infestations in white pine yet. It does have multiple generations, and this is where we start getting into like the problems with some of these biological factors and how they can really cause a lot of damage. And so you have multiple generations. We think probably 2 or 3 up here or on Long Island. But further south, you're talking about 7, 8 generations a year, and those insects are all forming, we call them spots, but they're infestations. Each generation comes out and just grows that infestation. So, something like 90% of the beetles that emerge from within an infestation stay within that infestation, and they just grow this. So you can go from 20 trees to 10,000 trees throughout a growing season. So it can be, it all depends on landscape and stand structure and all of that, but it can be a real problem very quickly. Much of this is sort of maintained, or the mechanism for this is this well-developed pheromone system, right? So beetles are releasing pheromones and directing other beetles to trees that they mass attack. When those trees are overwhelmed, the pheromone system shifts to anti-aggregation, so it directs incoming beetles to adjacent trees, and that's why you get this kind of spot formation or these clustered groups of trees. So jump into the winter temperatures. I just wanted to show you this to see, so you could get an idea how important this is. The Fahrenheit is up at the top there, and then that y-axis is the overwintering mortality. And so 0 degrees, a cold winter night of 0, not something that we would think of those overly excessive in the Northeast, but all these temperatures are becoming rare. But even just at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, we're getting about a little bit over 50% mortality. So, you're still maintaining a population at that time. But if you start getting into, -5, -9, -10 degrees, then you're up at over 80% mortality. And that's where it's going to be really tough for southern pine beetle to maintain population. So when those temperatures release and get warmer, it really releases the beetle and allows it to maintain populations that are ready for the spring to emerge and hit trees. I poached this modern version or image off of online, but it does the job for what we want to talk about. I just wanted to kind of go through really quickly spot growth and why an infestation starting in an unmanaged stand is such a problem. You can see on the left there's the spot origin, or that's the first tree that was attacked. Beetles come out, the spot is moving to the right in this image. These red trees at this point would be already attacked and producing brood of that next generation. They're currently attacking those yellow trees because that's that crown fading into yellow, and then also attacking these fresh attack trees, the green trees sort of in the middle there. And then that spot just continues to grow until either cold temperatures hit, not the critical temperatures that limit distribution, but just slow down, fall temperatures that slow down the beetle. And so this infestation could grow all summer, just continually moving through any of the resources that are there. And this becomes important when we start thinking about how we manage the insect. And these are other images that I grabbed from elsewhere. And so this is, when you have infestations like that, so what happened on Long Island, we found southern pine beetle there, and it was, already established. We had to move into trying to limit, tree mortality, and that was through a reactive, approach with southern pine beetle suppression. And these images are pretty much the exact same as the previous one. So you've got, the infestation spreading to the right in this, the initial attack back here. And so with cut and leave suppression, you cut all of the infested trees and drop them back towards the center of the infestation. And this is meant to disrupt the pheromones, right? So that are guiding the insect to the next tree to attack. And so you also take a green tree buffer, because those trees you're not sure if they're attacked or not. You need to make sure you're eliminating all of the pheromones. The figure on the right is cut and remove. We haven't really been able to do that anywhere because there just hasn't been a market for the material, but it's the same as cut and leave, but you're pulling all of that material out. So you can imagine how disruptive this is in a forest or to an organization that has to respond to this, and the dramatic change that, occurs in these stands if you only rely on suppression. Fortunately, there's a way to be proactive, and that's where like our work, or my work as a forest entomologist, ties in with this giant community in the Northeast of folks doing restoration ecology, prescribed fire, trying to move, stands that have developed naturally as open, with open conditions, but without management have gotten really overstocked. And those are the types of forests that are at really, high risk to being impacted by southern pine beetle. And so just really kind of basically, it really just boils down to basal area. There's some other factors there too, but from the work in the South, stands above 120 square feet are very susceptible to southern pine beetle. So if beetles arrive, they're most likely to do a lot of damage in that stand. When you start to lower that basal area, and we have some work for off of Long Island, when you start to get down to 65, 60 or below, if beetles were to get into those stands, they wouldn't be able to grow those infestations. And so, you're not completely eliminating southern pine beetle, but you're reducing the potential for damage. And so this, fortunately, and it's amazing, this ties in really well with like the work that John's doing and everybody else that's managing pitch pine and trying to restore more natural conditions. You want these open conditions and the crowns, open crowns, all of that. So there's two things that come into play here, and the first thing, when you think about stand thinning, you go to tree growth and to tree health or whatever, but really, for the thing that drives protecting these stands, the mechanism is disrupting the pheromone. And this picture on the left is an unmanaged stand on Long Island, one of these dog hair stands that John mentioned from Waterboro. And you can imagine there, if you have a pheromone being released and then you have the volatiles from the injured trees, they're not going to be that disrupted. I mean, there's always some plume disruption, but you can see how things would be kept, those plumes could be kept low. And so beetles are able to go boom, boom, boom right through those trees. When you open this up, and this is a picture from Waterboro on the right, and you have these really much larger inner tree distances, and then you have, more importantly, this open crown where you've got pheromones going up and leaving the stand that way, but then also being disrupted down low. And beetles have evolved to try to handle disrupted patterns to plumes and all that, but when you get into these larger areas, they lose the signal and then disperse out. And in the summer, they don't have very much fat, so when they disperse, they can't go very far, and most of that dispersing population is killed off or dies off. And then there is a tree health component to it as well, and you're trying to increase the resin defense in those residual trees. so they can fight off any attack. And so ideally, you have healthy trees in a stand after thinning. If beetles do come in, populations are low or moderate, the tree should be able to fight those off and and win that battle between tree and beetle. Now, if you have really high populations and they roll through an area, they're going to overwhelm even the healthiest trees. So it's kind of, it just depends what's going on in the surrounding areas and the landscape. And I think the important thing going on in Massachusetts now and what is going on in Maine and some of these other areas is trying to get a lot of these stands, thinned and get fire back in there, restore them. And then we won't be in a situation where we've built up these giant populations of southern pine beetle in the area, and a landscape will be able to protect more. So I think that's it for me.
Awesome. That was a really great presentation, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not seeing questions in the chat yet. I'm sure people have questions, so please feel free to keep them coming. So Dan, if you're ready, I think we'd love to have your slides up. This will pick up the story where Kevin left off.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Dan Perkins. I work for the Maine Forest Service. As a ranger specialist, I started my career with the Nature Conservancy and John and some other folks, so it's a pleasure to be here. Briefly wanted to talk about laws in Maine as it relates to prescribed fire. I realize there's a lot of folks here who aren't in Maine. I would just, mention that it's probably worth a phone call to whoever it is in your state or your province or wherever. Usually there's statute as it relates to prescribed fire, things to think about. So for the Maine perspective, we have a couple of different statutes that I want to go through. So most of our fire statutes are in Title 12. The number one thing I'll start with is that you do need a burn permit to do any open burning. So there's some exemptions for campfires. Obviously, that's not what we're talking about here. In the organized towns, we do have quite a bit of local control in Maine. So there's a town warden in each town, and they are the one who are going to write the burn permits. You'll find that some towns delegate that to the town office staff. Some, it's anybody on a fire department. You're just going to have to work with your local town. I will say that, as in anything, relationships are very important. John and his team have worked for a very long time to educate those folks in their towns, what they're doing, how it's being done in a safe manner. So you may find that if you are managing land in a place where the prescribed fire hasn't been done before, you may meet a little bit of a resistance. And all the town wardens, it's a little complicated, but they are technically Maine Forest Service employees. So if you are having challenges with a town warden who's just saying, I don't want this in my town, go somewhere else, do let us know, and we can try to work with you and work with that person and do some education and see how we can help you. I know that's been an issue, primarily more with folks that do burning for blueberry management. There's some towns that have said, well, we just don't want to do that. And we've kind of worked through that process. Again, like I said, relationships are everything. So education is a key component. We do have another law in Maine that says basically you have to extinguish the fire before you leave. And there are obviously some challenges with that, with larger scale prescribed fires. And, we're looking at this picture here is grass. Pretty easy, right? We're going to be confident that when we leave that for the day, that's done. When you get into timber, like John and his team is doing with pitch pine, scrub oak, we may have to think a little more carefully about having some staff at night, things like that. And then again, each state is different, but I did want to note that, if you kindle a fire, you have to do it in a careful and prudent manner, and you're liable to civil action. So it does just, this is not necessarily a management tool that we're going to undertake, or you should undertake without a fair amount of forethought. And then, so any burning you do, section 9325 says it needs to be according to the terms and conditions of your permit. So a town warden, or in the unorganized territory, the Maine Forest Service acts as the town warden. So we might say on your permit, hey, you need to have 10 people, you need to have pumps, you need to have whatever. And then the key last line is there may not create a nuisance. So what that means in Maine is that if we get a bunch of complaints about your smoke production is typically the main one, your permit can get revoked. And so, being cognizant, writing that burn plan in a manner that where your smoke is going to go, selecting the days, because if push comes to shove and a lot of people complain, we do have the ability and to some extent we need to deal with that complaint. We do have some new laws as of last week from the previous legislative session regarding red flag warning days. So red flag warnings are issued by the National Weather Service. I don't have the exact language because it hasn't been put into the state online statute database, but you could look that up if you have any questions. And then just, the last thing that I really want to reiterate is John and his folks obviously, have taken the time to build those relationships and work with folks because they're doing things that are a little bit out of the box, particularly in the Northeast, right? People are not wildly comfortable with fire. They don't see it every week on the news. So if you're in Maine, please reach out to the Maine Forest Service, see how we can help you. If you're outside of Maine, it's worth, making some extra phone calls, doing those site visits, things like that. So with that, that's all I have, and I can take questions later. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Dan. So I think let's pin John and Kevin as well as Dan. We'll keep you on camera if you're willing, Dan. And we had a question or two that popped into the chat. So the first one we'll pitch to Kevin. So Andy's asking, what is the risk level to red pine and jack pine in northern New England? And I'm assuming that's through risk for southern pine beetle, but we could also think about what's the risk for wildfire as well.
Yeah, it's a good question. So not a lot of encounters between southern pine beetle and red pine, but they have killed red pine in Connecticut. No reason to think that, if southern pine beetle encountered more stands of red pine, they wouldn't rip through it pretty well. A lot of the red pine's gone, of course, like southern New England especially, even now moving into New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont just because of red pine scale. So it's not a huge resource that's unmanaged that's out there right now. As you get into New York, it's more important, of course. And then, so definitely a concern, and especially, when you model this stuff out and temperatures and everything, when you think about that Midwestern red pine resource in Ontario and all those would certainly be at risk to southern pine beetle. Jack pine, I don't think southern pine beetle's ever encountered it. I look at that as a forest or a tree in a stand structure that would be really conducive to southern pine beetle. There'd be a lot of stress in some of those stands that are unmanaged, and the younger stands with heavily stocked with a lot of material, that southern pine beetle could go do really well in those forests. So hopefully, it's several decades before we see that, but I don't know anymore. I thought it would be a little while before we'd see it in even in traps in Maine and New Hampshire, and we have already. So
thank you for that. Let's see. Kind of a building on that a little bit, a question maybe for Dan, followed by John. How common are wildfires in pitch pine forests in Maine? And maybe we don't have as much jack pine, but and also in red pine. And how common are wildfires in those forests? And what's the fire behavior like in wildfires versus in prescribed fires?
Well, I can speak very generally. I don't have the data right in front of me. I would say years like this when it rains every other day, not so many. Years like a couple years ago, we certainly have more. And obviously the big difference is John and his folks, have written that prescription. They have a pretty set idea of, the wind, the temperature, the relative humidity. They know they can run those in a computer model and get a pretty good sense of what fire behavior is. And then, in a wildfire, obviously unplanned, we haven't done that sort of work. So we're just going to deal with it as it comes.
And building off that, I guess from my perspective, wildfires, we monitor, at least from our scope, on our lands or lands that we're contracted to work on. Every year there's some kind of wildfire. Just 2 years ago at Kennebunk Plains, we presume from the report and kind of the lay of the land, it was a cigarette butt or something out of a car window, and it started a grass fire in the blueberry. So there's definitely a human cost, ATVs, party sites, campfires, neighbors burning debris and creeping outside over the boundaries. Most areas of those occurrences through the years have been into areas that we primarily focused on our boundaries, creating those wildland urban interface buffers and fire breaks. And then we have had areas actually from exhausts of dirt bikes start a fire inside a unit that we were going to burn, in a couple weeks post that fire, and it just skunked around because of the conditions of the time. But it does happen. I think when we look at it, we try to look at our fuel management holistically, of both us doing prescribed fire, the potential of a wildfire, and the potential of ignition from our neighbors abutting. So how can we manage all three of those risks and reduce that risk and work with our neighbors? As far as fire behavior goes, when we mechanically treat, like the photos that you saw post treatments, the fire behavior is going to be low to moderate, like behind Amanda, the photo. We want fire in a natural way, low and slow and creeping away and eating up those fuels, eating up that duff layer, getting a open sandy soil for the seed base. We don't mind a little what we call thermal thinning, which would be fire going up into the ladder fuels, the branches from the ground up into the canopy. But we don't typically want a crown fire. We do use modeling called Behave in our burn plans. And our burn units are set up for beyond the worst weather conditions that you could get. So we're lighting it under parameters, and we want it slow and low winds, like not above 15 miles per hour, 20-foot wind speeds. We want humidities in the upper 30s and 40s. But we prep it and mechanically treat it for unknown situations of high severe winds or a severe drop in humidity. Those would be outside of what we want to burn in, but it could happen. We plan, as a burn boss, you plan for the worst, but you expect the best, but you don't box yourself into a corner. And that gives you more wiggle room to manage the situation, to keep everybody healthy and safe and the fire safe. So that's how we typically, you're a risk manager and you look at that. So we want a little bit of fire. We want, a varying fire behavior in the units. Some can be really slow. Some might not burn at all, and leaving some refugia is fine. So we want that. We're typically looking for some of that in the unit. So it all varies on fuel loading and the weather conditions of that day and how you've mechanically treated it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that. We're getting a few more questions that are popping in. Nancy just asked, can folks speak to the susceptibility of these rare pitch pine systems to other factors associated with climate change, like tree physiology or other stressors besides southern pine beetle? In general, are we expecting to see increases in these species or declines with climate change?
I can take a stab at that, Amanda. It's a good question. I think as the stands are more and more stressed, they're not going to have, that background resin defense, and that's going to open them up to other things than southern pine beetle. We have a, well-developed community of native, bark beetles that historically have, this is their range. They are semi-aggressive, and so after fire, during drought conditions, you can start to get tree kills from those. Very common out west, some of the Ips bark beetles, and then also in the southeast. When I started here in the Northeast, I expected to see Ips infestations after thinnings and things like that. And I've never seen that yet, even when we've done everything wrong to kind of create IPS populations, we didn't get spillovers. And so that's something from a forest entomology point of view that I'm concerned about, is that, the more stress on the landscape, we might see this shift in some of those secondary species to becoming, more damaging, like what you see out west and in the southeast. And a lot of that would be driven by tree health and resin defenses and things like that. So.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kevin. I don't know if John or Dan, another question related to that. How is climate change compounding threats to pitch pine forests? So have you seen other effects of climate change or related factors or other stressors on some of these pitch pine forests?
I guess I can throw a little in there. To be completely honest with you, I feel like it's the human element that is the hardest thing to manage, is people and our neighbors and community and recreation, dumping, perceptions, the news, what they're seeing out west, to what fire will be here. That human social climate is probably the hardest thing to change. I think that that is one of the hardest kind of experiences. I would say we're seeing some invasives as far as climate change creeping in, more plant species, mainly where there's disturbance or infrastructure being built or along road edges. Luckily, the invasive plants that we've encountered are not fire adaptive, or haven't been, so knock on wood with that. And we've been able to work with partners to manage those, and a lot of them don't like the nutrient poor sandy soils. So to our benefit, they're not very their spreading rate is really minimal. I think that's one thing that kind of this summer, as we found more buckthorn along road edges here and there, may be accelerated, or most likely will be accelerated with climate change. But if we're managing these systems in a holistic, healthy way, then the soil types, the landscape shouldn't be as available for those invasives. But I think there'll be more added challenges.
And then I would just, piggyback from everything I've heard from folks who are doing this sort of research on climate change and fire in the Northeast. The answer is that the jury is still out. There's no definitive change one way or the other in fire occurrence. Obviously we've all seen that there's more precipitation, but that yet hasn't been linked to a decrease. I think we can all point to these events where we get more precipitation, but then we also have times where there's more gaps between precipitation. So there's nothing firm on any of that yet.
Yeah, thanks for that. Interesting you should mention the human element. One of the questions that came in during registration was, because of climate change, should we not try to minimize burning and only burn where essential? Anyone is welcome to answer that one.
I mean, I can take a stab from the state's perspective. I think, we would say that the work that John and other folks are doing in this kind of area, this does meet that capital E essential. This is species and habitat, that's very important to maintain. I think, we wouldn't encourage people to just go out and willy-nilly put fire on the landscape to check a box. But if there's a really good ecological reason, then absolutely we want to support that.
I echo that as well. When we're looking at this, we're looking at it, our first priority is ecological. It's balanced with ecological, fuel reduction, and fire training. So those three are our key objectives. But we're looking at areas that are fire adaptive systems, where the species rely on fire to be part of that healthy balance that has been lacking. And those are the areas that we're focusing on primarily. I wouldn't say, we definitely have worked with partners on reducing hazardous fuels around communities where there's thatch and hay fields or vegetation that's built up. So we have supported those types of burns as well. Although I think fire is an amazing tool, there are definitely places where it's not appropriate. But there are plenty of places in Maine and New England where fire is part of the system, and I hope that it will continue to grow and safely be used.
Thank you. Kevin, do you want to chime in on that? On burning only where essential versus burning more widely?
Yeah, I don't have much to add to what John and Dan said. I think for me, when I look at landscape and at-risk forests for insect pests or whatever, there's not one thing that fits across those stand types on a landscape, and so a lot of forest types aren't appropriate to stock carbon in, and we have to get that message out that some areas, you let forest develop old growth structure, preserve areas that are already have those, but if we want to maintain something like pitch pine, it has to be active management and thought out, and that's what everybody's doing. So yeah.
Great, thank you. The next one may be for Dan or for John. If a landowner is interested in burning a larger acreage of forest, where can they get training and support?
I think, I would start with a call to your district forester, or, we always encourage folks to use a licensed forester when you're considering land management. Talk to that person. Is it truly the right tool for your area? And then we usually offer trainings kind of throughout the state all year, and maybe John can touch a little bit more on the Prescribed Fire Council.
Yeah, I think we formed a Prescribed Fire Council, and it's a bunch of stakeholders in Maine that are either actively using fire, or researchers or scientists, collaborators. And that's a great way to get involved. And we're trying to use that as an educational outlet to the public as well on using smart, safe, good fire within Maine state laws. I would say we also offer, we have an amazing group of volunteers that we train up at the Nature Conservancy, as well as the Maine Forest Service, and a bunch of other partners. We all work together on training up volunteers to learn and burn with us safely, to help us out, to protect their communities and make nature healthier. So that's another way to get engaged. And then we just, same deal, we point folks in the direction of the Maine Forest Service if they're interested in burning. Sometimes there are too many risks involved with burning that it's not worth lighting a match there, but getting folks with those skill sets to look at that can better help landowners out.
And then just one more thought on that, John, that if it is something that you want to do on your land base and you do decide that it's the right move, but you think, for you personally or your company or your agency, it's more than you want to jump into, there are third-party contractors who do this kind of work.
Awesome, thank you. I think the last question that we've got, more broadly, what would it take to restore resilience to pitch pine barrens in Maine and prevent the spread of southern pine beetle? I know you're all doing everything you can, but what would it take to really restore resilience in Maine?
I mean, that's a big question. I think that the process is in place right now, and the work at Waterboro, and I would even broaden from Maine and just say regionally, in New England, there's just so much effort right now to really protect these ecosystems and get into areas that had been abandoned and hadn't been managed for decades and restore them and protect them going forward. So I don't know what you do other than what we're doing in a way, except if you could open up larger areas for treatments and more funding and things like that. But I'm pretty, I came into the whole pitch pine restoration stuff very late, recently, the last couple of years, and it's just an impressive group of people that for decades, some of them have been doing treatments and following them and gathering data. And so, people have been worried about this for a long time and working on it. And so there's a lot of information out there, and people are putting the treatments out on the landscape as much as they can,
I agree. I think that we're in a place where to be able to safely do fire, we have to do it in a controlled, planned manner. And so it is interesting that we as humans are looking at a snapshot in time. So I ask myself, as we're out there trying to put all this effort and energy into it, are we really going in a positive direction? In the greater scheme of things, is this supposed to be the disturbance to replace the stand or the system? And so you start thinking about these huge philosophical questions on why we're doing this. I think we're doing we're making positive action out there for it. If I could, like, with infrastructure and houses and roads, the idea of like fire use, like we're trying to manage it in a safe way, and have fire breaks and have these prescriptions. If we could like let a lightning strike hit a tree and burn naturally with its varying severity, like that would be the holy grail of this. But we just can't do that, because we're going to put lives and infrastructure and homes at risk. But I think on a smaller scale, we can do it with a prescribed fire that's planned. And it's just getting more folks trained up, more organizations and agencies helping to get this done, to get a bigger scale across the landscape, and I'll get on the same page. So it is one that I think about every day when we walk through the Pine Barrens, is like, how can we ramp this up? How can we make it more of a natural approach? And I think that's why when we light a fire, we want it to do its thing and kind of munch away and maybe skip an area and burn along. We're mimicking it as the best we can with liabilities and law and houses and roads and all that.
Dan, any final thoughts?
No, I just, again, John and his folks have really tried to build relationships. And I think anytime you're trying to do something on a landscape scale or over a broader area, you have to work with a big coalition that's sometimes bigger than you want to get buy-in, to get big results.
Awesome. Thank you all. So I think if everyone can join me in a virtual round of applause for our speakers. Thank you so much, you guys. This was really, really great. This is an excellent introduction and overview of pitch pine management, southern pine beetle, Waterboro Barrens. And if you want to learn more, come join us on Friday on the field tour. I don't know if Aaron or Meg, if you want to hop on and just share a little bit about logistics.
Yeah. I think an important part of this series has always been getting out to the sites that we talk about during the webinar, and there's an opportunity to do that this Friday from 9 to 1. Our speakers will join us. The weather looks good and always nice to get out this time of year. I did put the registration in the chat. There are quite a few spots still open. I know Fridays can be a busy time for people, so Meg has just launched a tool that if you would like us to reschedule, we could do this again in the spring. There's a current operation going on. They're getting ready for a burn, so there might be some interesting things to see down the line. But also, they're just getting started with the logging, so there's some stuff to see this Friday as well. So you can take a look at the poll. We'll make some decisions with that information. If you want to join us, the link is in the chat. We'll send out a logistics reminder tomorrow morning, depending on what we decide, and be great to have a good group of folks join us for further discussion in the field. So with that, we will always welcome your feedback on these events. There's one coming up in 4 weeks, December, I shouldn't say the date. If you go to the center website, the link in the chat, it's a Bear Brook watershed and the importance of long-term management. So that is December
6th and 8th.
6th. Yep. So I'll put that in the chat. Again, same format, Wednesday webinar. Well, Ivan Fernandez, Mike Howell of the American Forest Management, and Jake Metzler of Maine Forest Society of Maine will join us, and we'll plan on a Friday field trip depending on what the weather conditions look like. But for now, thanks for all the input. Thanks to our speakers, and thanks to you, Amanda, for facilitating a great discussion. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care and be well. And we hope to see you soon.